Good morning. My name is Karen C. Morales, and I serve as a trustee here at Dupage Unitarian Universalist Church. We want to welcome everyone to our open and inclusive virtual community this morning. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and we pledge to support one another as we walk these paths. We are so glad you were able to find us this morning and join us for our live stream service. Please check the church website at dupageuchurch.org for updates. If you search under Dupage UU Church on Facebook, you will find a number of ways to be in community with us as well. I have an additional announcement today. We want you to save the date for Dupage UU Church's 2020 annual auction. This year's theme, Star Trek. November 7th, online, all day from the comfort of your own home. Highly illogical? Well, sure, but Dupage UU Church will make every attempt to live long and prosper. Begin thinking creatively about remote events, food, and services you can offer. Think creatively about those items you will purchase. Stay tuned. Ideas, details, and more information to come. Today, Coffee Hour will be on Zoom. The link to join after the service is in your order of service and your weekly email update.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome. Sorry. We each live our lives in an unseen liminal space between what was and what is, ever and always in a process of becoming. Who we are, living and loving in that liminal space, connects each of us to whom we shall become, dancing with the sacred and the sublime. From an eternal source and ground of all being we come, drinking from the well of wisdom and drawing light and warmth from an ineffable flame. It is here, living in this mystery, that we find each other, in the numinous and luminous experience. And for this, we light our flaming chalice today. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all. Our opening hymn is a UU favorite. It is Spirit of Life It's 123 in the gray hymnal, and the words will be on your screen at home.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Please join in saying our spoken affirmation, which will be followed by the sung affirmation.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. From all who dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
It is time to gather. So one day, a religious man approached a mystic and asked, "Does God exist?" "Allow me to go within for an answer," the mystic replied. After meditating for quite some time, expanding her heart consciousness to embrace the totality of existence, she answered, "I do not know what you mean by the word God, but I do know that this world is more mysterious and more wonderful than I could ever imagine. I know that you and I are part of something so much larger than our own lives. Perhaps this something larger is what you seek." So then the religious man approached a scientist. "Does God exist?" he asked. "Let me think," the scientist replied. And so she thought. She thought about the vastness of the universe, 156 billion light years, or something like 936 billion trillion miles in diameter, an almost immeasurable smallness of a quark. She thought of how the energy of the Big Bang fuels the beating of her own heart. And then she answered, I do not know what you mean by the word God, but I do know that this world is more mysterious and more wonderful than I could ever imagine. I know that you and I are part of something so much larger than our own lives. Perhaps this something larger is what you seek. So the religious man then thought to himself. He thought of what he knows and what he does not know. He thought about how he knows what he knows and how he knows he doesn't know what he doesn't know. He thought about his experience of the world and how it is but one tiny infinitesimal fraction of all experience. He thought about his dependence on forces larger than himself. And he thought about the interdependence of all existence. He experienced wonder and pondered mystery. And then he knew in his soul the truth of what the mystic and the scientist said, that he is part of something so much larger than his own life. And then, and only then, did he think about what he would call it.
Our reading is from Religious Integrity for Everyone by Fred Campbell. Today, we will hear the third installment in a sermon series about 4 spiritualities, which are naturalism, theism, mysticism, and humanism. These 4 spiritualities, building blocks for bigger concepts in theology, were first identified by a UU minister, the Reverend Fred Campbell. About mysticism, Campbell wrote, mystics are people who have experienced a union with the transcendent creativity of our universe. This is only one way to say it. Mystics know that science has great power to deal with the material world, and that there is more to our world than science is currently able to handle. What the mystics experience is natural to them rather than supernatural. It may be outside of the capabilities of humanists to understand, but it is a result of who they are and what they are capable of experiencing and knowing. Mystics have a profound sense of dependence upon and trust of the transcendent. Many mystics believe in some form of life after death or reincarnation. However, some believe in death as final. Mystics live in 2 realms, the material and the spiritual. The world of spirit is one of energy, process, and relationships, which are in some sense outside of secular culture. This guiding transcendent reference system is too real to be denied, yet it is a little fuzzy to describe precisely. Nevertheless, it informs and shapes mystics' understanding of their living. Here ends the reading.
Let us take a few moments to recall friends and family in this church and elsewhere in your lives. During the COVID pandemic, so much has changed, and social distance has prevented us from seeing others that we care about. Let us take a few minutes to remember all those who we are missing. It is in honor of the people we love that we light our candle of joys and concerns today. Thank you, Vera. As Carolyn said a few moments ago, this month I'm giving a 4-part series on the 4 spiritualities: theism and naturalism, humanism, and mysticism. These are orientations of belief that we commonly find in Unitarian Universalism, and today I'm speaking about mysticism. The word mysticism comes from the Greek root that means to conceal. Over time, the meaning of mysticism has shifted to mean the opposite, that it is something revealed rather than concealed. The common usage of the word mysticism encompasses a broad range of spiritual experiences regardless of religion. Some theologians speak of a perennialist philosophy, which posits that mystical experiences across all religions are basically the same in terms of innate quality, intensity, and meaning. There is some basic universal truth underlying all religions and spiritual expressions. A mystical experience may be described as one's personal union with the divine, or as a realization of oneself as an integrated part of the holistic universe. Furthermore, our understanding of the concept of mysticism is wrapped up and all tangled with our understanding of the concept of consciousness. There's no mystical experience without consciousness. Likewise, mystics might say that there's no true consciousness without the mystical realization that one is part of something greater than oneself. To dig a little deeper into this, I'd like to share a short reading. In his book, Eco-Mysticism, Dr. Carl von Essen wrote, "The roots of those feelings that we consider to be spiritual or mystical appear to grow from the depths of our consciousness. Beginning with models that serve as metaphors for mystical experience, thinkers have repeatedly turned to developing scientific disciplines for the tools to reach this frontier of our psyche. William James considered mystical experience to be the mother sea and fountainhead of all religions, and to inhabit a dimension beyond that of intellect, an extended subliminal self with a thin partition through which messages make irruption. Beyond the farther margins of that subliminal field of consciousness, James evoked the existence beyond of an absolute mind or a distinct deity. The common thread of mystical experience found in all of the world's religions places the mystic into relationship with the holy, the sublime, the deeper truth of all that is, sometimes called the Buddha nature or the Tao, Brahman, or God. It is the deep experience of knowledge gleaned that those named entities are not separate, nor are we separate from them, but that we are all and each part of the holy. A common element of mysticism is a study of the esoteric parts of any given religion, and another common element is that fundamentalist groups within each of those religions often reject the mystical teachings, even going so far as to say that it's not part of the religion at all. Many Christians rejected the Gnostics and the Essenes. Some Jews disregard the Kabbalah, and some Muslims believe the Sufis are at best a bunch of deluded dancers and poets, and at worst heretics. This phenomenon can also be found in non-Western religions. But if we remove the esoteric language of any given religion and strip down mysticism to its core, the very basic mystical experience, we find that the common thread, the common ground, is the human-divine relationship. This relationship is once part in what the Jewish theologian Martin Buber called the ground of all being. This mystical experience is about feeling a sense of oneness, a sense of awe of the great magnitude of that which we are a part. The psychologist Sigmund Freud called it the oceanic feeling, in which we may encounter the ocean and feel that it is infinite and eternal, and yet that is merely a factor of our limited capacity to sense the greater whole. It has been suggested that mystical experience is like this, that we can sense that we are part of something so huge it's beyond our comprehension. We cannot possibly see the edge, and yet it may not be infinite or eternal, but simply greater than our capacity to sense. This quality of mysticism seems similar to naturalism, which we discussed a couple weeks ago. And with all this talk of mystical experiences, I'd be remiss if I did not share some of the criticism of mysticism that can be found in theological academia. A German philosopher who was also influenced by Eastern thought, Arthur Schopenhauer, once wrote, "In the widest sense, mysticism is every guidance to the immediate awareness of what is not reached either by perception or conception, or generally by any knowledge. The mystic is opposed to the philosopher by the fact that he begins from within, whereas the philosopher begins from without. The mystic starts from his inner, positive, individual experience in which he finds himself as the eternal and only being, and so on. But nothing of this is communicable, except the assertions that we have to accept on his word. Consequently, he is unable to convince." Clearly, Schopenhauer, like many others, was seeking proof of the truth as experienced by mystics, which is an inherent impossibility. A mystic may claim their experience is truth, but cannot possibly prove to another person that it is indeed truth. Mysticism and empiricism are mutually exclusive because mysticism relies on revelation, some sort of inner knowledge and personal experience, while empiricism relies on proving a hypothesis by collecting external data and observing natural phenomenon related to the hypothesis. A mystic's experience, what we will shortly learn to think of as an awakening or apotheosis, cannot really be observed and verified by another person. This was the crux of Schopenhauer's criticism. This very thing is also the basis of faith for mystics. And the mystic would hold that while the facts described by Schopenhauer are true, they do not disprove the experience that the mystic had. Recall again the words of William James about mystical experience populating a dimension beyond intellect. Just because one cannot see the dimension does not mean that it is not there. I will pause here for the offering and offertory and return to the sermon in a few moments.
These are the words of Unitarian Universalist religious educator Sophia Lyon-Fahs. We gather in reverence before the wonder of life, the wonder of this moment, the wonder of being together so close yet so apart, each hidden in our own secret chamber, each listening, each trying to speak, yet none fully understanding, none fully understood. We gather in reverence before all intangible things that eyes see not, nor ears can detect, that hands can never touch, that space cannot hold, and time cannot measure. The offering for the support of this congregation will now be given and received.
A few moments ago, I was speaking of the Gnostics and Essenes, two groups of esoteric Christians from early in the Common Era. These groups placed great value on one's personal gnosis, or knowledge of God, one's own vision of all that is. In the centuries since then, Christian theologians have begun to categorize Christian mysticism in one of three ways. The first category is biblical mysticism, in which the mystic seeks to glean hidden knowledge from Scripture, to read between the lines, as it were, to seek out the code of existence that they believe is hidden within the Bible. This form of mysticism has, in the recent era, been sensationalized in the novels of Dan Brown, such as The Da Vinci Code. The second form of Christian mysticism is liturgical and is very much centered around the sacrament of the Eucharist. For an observant Christian, this is about having an experience in which they feel they have become one with Christ through the ritual of communion. The third form is called contemplative mysticism, or sometimes spiritual mysticism, but spiritual has become a catch-all with lots of baggage, so perhaps contemplative mysticism is more apropos. This one relates to personal experience of the holy through prayer and meditation, and has the most in common with mysticism as it has appeared in other religions. In Christian history, many mystics are remembered, such as the Abbess Hildegard of Bingen and the Desert Fathers, who were hermits living in the dry lands of Egypt. More recently, one may recall the work of Thomas Merton, a monk in Kentucky, that called Catholics, and indeed all religious people, back to social justice. In Merton's mystical experience, it was by acknowledging oneself as part of God that one realized a deep and abiding responsibility to help all others. And from this mystical outlook sprang the importance of social justice work, in his view. I've never been a Catholic, but I sense truth in Merton's experience and teaching. In Eastern philosophies, a common and important teaching is about a person's lifelong journey to achieve enlightenment. This places a pinnacle mystical experience at the center of all spiritual practice in many of the Eastern religions, including various forms of Buddhism and Hinduism. We use the English word enlightenment to translate from the Pali or Sanskrit, but we could as easily translate the concept as awakening or full understanding. This awakening refers to the realization that one may have about one's true nature, which is that, in their teaching, we are all a part of the Buddha nature that is all of existence. This realization and bone-deep understanding is sometimes called nirvana. It is taught that the workings of our minds, the intellect that is focused on the here and now, limits us and prevents us from achieving this awakening unless we actively strive to overcome this limitation. That is the whole point of Buddhist practice, and is similar with slightly different terminology for some paths in Hinduism, such as spiritual yoga and Vedanta. I say spiritual yoga to differentiate the religious path from the exercise classes that some folks attend. It is from Vedanta that I found the concept of Brahman and Atman that you have heard me mention from time to time. In this teaching, Atman is the name of your personal soul, and Brahman is the name of the world's soul. Furthermore, Atman is understood to be a nugget of Brahman within each and every person. That is, a person's soul is an emanation of the world soul and not an independent entity at all. Enlightenment is simply recognition of this soul relationship, a concept that was to be influential on the Transcendentalist movement and Ralph Waldo Emerson, which we'll come back to. A variation of the Brahman-Atman relationship is found in some of the Eastern religions, in which the soul is an entity that must learn certain lessons before it can be reunited and merged with the holy. For this reason, some teachings say that the soul is reincarnated in body after body until the soul of that person has finally achieved enlightenment and can again be united with all that is Brahman or Buddha nature. This concept of the merger of one soul with Brahman or Buddha nature or God has a technical term in theology, apotheosis, meaning becoming one with God. This name amuses me a bit, coming from a medical background in which the suffix osis refers to a disease or dysfunction, such as halitosis or cirrhosis of the liver. But to think about apotheosis as a disease of religion is perhaps a sermon for a different day. It's kind of funny to tell jokes without the whole congregation here to laugh. Are you laughing at home? I can't tell. I've just detailed an Eastern understanding of apotheosis with Brahman or Buddha nature and the importance of seeking enlightenment. A Western understanding is found in the Abrahamic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, teaches that our souls are all moving towards a state in which they or we partake in the divine nature of God. All three of these religions teach that every person can and should achieve a state of apotheosis upon death by following the rules of one's respective religion. Many mystics, however, express that they experienced a oneness with God, apotheosis, in this life. They didn't wait for death. And that is the heart of mysticism in the Western tradition, becoming one with the holy, understanding oneself as part of something greater than each of us alone. A moment ago, I said I would return to Emerson and the teachings of Transcendentalism, which were deeply influential in the history of Unitarianism. I would say Emerson and other Transcendentalists developed the concept of spirituality as we most commonly think of it in Western culture now. That whole "I'm spiritual but not religious" thing arose from their influence on our society, in my opinion. Transcendentalist teachings place great importance on personal experience of the holy and one's own intuition about the nature of truth. They sought out truth in various religions and sciences, not just in the Christian thought that was dominant in their place and time. In fact, it was the Transcendentalists that popularized the works of Eastern philosophers and teachers to the United States, starting a trend that would grow so much that we eventually became the most religiously diverse country in the world. We talk a lot about how Transcendentalists influenced Unitarianism, but often forget that it was also a literary movement as well as a spiritual movement that extended far beyond the walls of Unitarian churches. Emerson wrote an essay called The Oversoul, which was more of a work of art designed to inspire rather than a theological discourse. One may see that it was influenced by the Vedantic teachings of the Atman-Brahman relationship. Emerson named these in English, the soul and the oversoul. He described the latter as that unity, that oversoul within which every man's particular being is contained and made one with all other, that common heart, he said. And I will close there with that summary of mystical experience. One's inner self is derived from, found within, and joins with the common heart that is our source. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all. From wherever you are, I invite you to join your voices in song. We are singing 1052 in the Teal hymnal, The Oneness of Everything.
For
Faith is elusive, truth is subjective, love is eternal. One life is short, and yet all life is ever so long, and that which we might call God is simply unknowable. And yet, through countless centuries and in the hearts of thousands who've come before us, there is an experience and a knowledge of something so basic and so pure. It is the eternal source from whence we all came, the ground of all being upon which we walk, and the flame that lights the deepest darkness. Although we may not know a God, we do know this. It is from the source of all we came, and it is to the source we shall each return in a union of pure and powerful love. Upon this foundation do we lay our faith, where we each find our own truths, although we may use different words. It is also here that we express our love, and here we live the life that we are given. May it ever be so, and blessed be you all. Everybody at home, have a great week.